Good evening, all of you. This is Chandrakala, expert in clinical research operations. I have 12 years of experience in this domain. If you want to take live training with me, you can contact on below numbers, or you can directly go to website greatonlinetraining.com. There you can enroll for the course. So today I'm going to cover the clinical research associate training. Day one, I'm going to cover introduction to clinical trial, the basic introduction to clinical research, the process of the clinical research. So right from the preclinical till marketing, what are all the steps? So right from the lab to pharmacy. So what are all the pharma companies do? So day one, you're going to learn the basic workflow of the clinical trial. And along with that, I'm going to explain the role of the clinical research associate. Clinical research associate is also called monitor. So the basic role of the CRA. Actually, CRA is a line of communication between pharmaceutical companies and the site where exactly the clinical research is being conducted. Because he will be visiting the site, check all the details at the site and reporting back to pharmaceutical companies. So the role of the CRA that I'm going to explain in day one. So day one, clinical research process and the role of the CRA, basic role of the CRA. Day two, on-site role. When he is at the site, what are all they check? So what is the role of CRA when he is at the site? What are all the things they monitor? What are all the things that they ensure? What are all the documents that they check? So we are going to learn in day two. Day three, types of the visits. So types of the visits and clinical trial monitoring. Clinical trial monitoring. What is clinical trial monitoring? And the process of the monitoring, the purpose of the monitoring, and qualities of good monitor. Nature and extent of the monitoring. Types of the monitoring, like on-site monitoring, risk-based monitoring, central monitoring. So these are all that we are going to learn in day three. Apart from these are all the basic concepts of clinical trial monitoring. Types of the visits also I'm going to touch here. So generally regular monitor visits will be broken down into 4. So pre-study visits, site initiation visit, periodic monitoring visits, closeout visits. So pre-study visits, site initiation visits, periodic monitoring visits, closeout visits. Out of which first 2 we are going to learn in day 3. So which is site initiation visit and site qualification visit. So what is the process of this visit? In this visit, what are all the monitor check? So in the visit 1, type 1 is a site qualification visit, or also called site selection visit. Here mainly these visits are to determine if the investigator site have a capability to conduct the clinical research. They check the site capability in visit 1, type 1. In the type 2 visit, they will mainly confirm whether the site is ready to conduct the clinical studies. So these are all that you're going to learn in day 3. Day 4, continuation of type of visits. Other two types of visits. Type 3, type 4. Type 3, periodic monitoring visits. So the focus of this visit will be evaluating the way the study being conducted, how the study is going on. So they will plan. So these are the routine visits. During the conduct of clinical studies, they'll be visiting in different intervals. So the frequency of monitoring should be planned. And during this visit, they'll perform the source data verification. So visit day 4, you're going to learn visit 3 and visit 4. Periodic monitoring visit, closeout visits. During periodic monitoring visit, they perform the source data verification also. So the process of the source data verification, how we do that, what are all the elements to check in the source data verification, those are all that you're going to learn. Finally, I'm going to touch the closeout visit. When the research study has been completed at the particular site, then the closeout visit will occur. Okay, so those are all the monitor visits. CRA visits will be broken down into 4. Site initiation visit, site qualification visit, site periodic visits, routine visits, so closeout visit. Okay. So these 4 types of visits that you're going to learn in day 3 and day 4. Day 2, when he is at the site, when he is present at the site, what are all they check? So that will be covered in day 2. The basic overall role of the CRA will be covered in day 1 along with the basic introduction to clinical research. Today I'm going to give you a brief demo on the CRA training. CRA is a Clinical Research Associate. Clinical Research Associate. He is also called Monitor of the Study. Monitor of the clinical study. I'm going to explain the role of the CRA in the process of the clinical trial. But let us discuss about clinical trial process. Before we enter into CRA, we need to know what is clinical trial. What are all the phases of the clinical trial? So I'm going to explain first clinical trial process. Then I'm going to explain the CRA role in the process of the clinical trial. So let us have a session on the clinical trial process. So whenever pharma companies develop the product, pharma companies are called sponsoring companies. So whenever they develop the product, they do R&D. They do R&D on the products. The product can be the drug, device, vaccine, any new surgical procedure, or any device. Any diagnostic device, screening procedure. So whenever they develop a new product, they are not going to release a drug into market directly. So what they do, they should conduct the trials. They should conduct the trials on animals as well on human beings. So your clinical trial process will start with the preclinical trial. So it is also called non-clinical trial. It will be done on animals. So the main objective of animal studies is to find the kinetics, dynamics. They study kinetics and dynamics along with the toxicology. So we study the drug movement in the body and what drug does to the body and what body does to the drug. And we also see different toxicological properties of the product. So after all these, then they start clinical trial. But before we start clinical trial, they should get approval. They will get approval by submitting application called investigational new drug application. So they should ultimately get approval, license, to start experimenting the drug on human beings. So they should get approval from FDA. This approval is called investigational approval, investigational license. So in order to get this license, we should submit the application called investigational new drug application. So once we get approval from FDA, then we are good to start with the clinical trial. So clinical trial is nothing but testing the drug, experimenting the new product on human beings with the main objective of safety and efficacy of the new drug, new product. So the product can be drug, device, vaccine, procedure, any methodology. So this clinical trial will be done in 3 phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Throughout the clinical trial process, throughout the life cycle of the clinical trial, CRA will play main role by monitoring the study throughout all the phases, by reviewing the data, ensuring the data throughout all the phases. Clinical research associate plays critical role. So phase 1 will be done on 20 to 80 people. All are healthy people with the main objective of safety. So after successful completion of phase 1, they'll enter into phase 2. Phase 2 will increase the number of subjects. And along with the safety, will begin to evaluate the efficacy. That means we also study how well the drug works against the disease. Therapeutic activity of the product we'll see here. And we'll confirm the therapy here. We'll confirm the safety and efficacy in the phase 3 by recruiting, by experimenting the drug on large group of people. So this is safety as well as efficacy, but this time large number of people. After completion of the phase 3, third phase, the next step, we have to release the drug into market. So it's time for the marketing. But before we get into market, we should get again approval from the FDA. This time the approval license is called marketing license, marketing approval. And we should submit new drug application. Whatever the data that we are collecting from phase 1, 2, 3 and preclinical, all the data will be part of NDA. So we'll submit all this data to FDA and we'll get approval from the FDA. FDA will decide based on the data conclusions. They will decide whether approve the drug for marketing, reject the drug for marketing. If the product is approved, then we start marketing of the product. Even after marketing also, we still need to monitor the product. We still need to study the product even after marketing. There you start phase 4 clinical studies, also called PMS, post-marketing surveillance. Okay. So this will be done to study rare, unusual, and long-term adverse effects, which are not seen, not detected, not observed in any of the phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials. Okay, so this is your complete clinical trial process. Throughout the process, CRA will play the role. So we have clinical research team. Clinical research, generally clinical trial will be done at the sites. Site is called clinical site, clinical center, study site. It is the place where we conduct the clinical trial. It is a place where we conduct the clinical trial. So most of the clinical trials will be multi-centered. Most of the clinical trials will be multi-centered. So multi-centered trials. So mainly what they do, clinical trial team, CRA is one of the role in the clinical trial. So overall team is responsible for recruiting the subjects. Here the patients are called subjects. Recruiting the subjects as per the criteria, certain criteria will have, called eligibility criteria. Clinical trial team involves recruiting the subjects, dispensing the product, like treatment of the subjects with the drug, treatment with the new drug. But before we start treatment, they should collect the data. This data is called baseline data. This data is called baseline data. What is baseline data? Baseline data is whatever the data that we are collecting before giving them the drug, as in demographic data, vital signs before the drug, physical examination before the drug. So those are all we collect. Then we start the treatment. After treatment also we'll collect the data. After treatment also they will collect the data. So this entire data will be collected on the forms called case report form. So different follow-up visits, they collect the data. So your entire data before the treatment, after the treatment, it will be collected on the forms called case report forms. Case report forms are the data collection tools which will be available in paper and electronic. So which are used to collect the data as per the protocol. So this is what exactly clinical trial team do. So they will recruit the subjects. Also, they obtain informed consent form from the subjects. That means they will take the consent from the subject, voluntary consent from the subject. That means site people will explain the details of the study to subjects. Subjects will go through all the details, risk, benefit, duration, what exactly the treatment, what exactly the drug is going to do. So they will know all the details, payment details, compensation details. Then they will decide whether to participate or not to participate. If they are really willing to participate, they sign this form, informed consent form, and they provide it to site people. So before we start the treatment, we should get the consent from the subject through this informed consent form. So this is what exactly clinical trial team do. In this, we have 4 roles. Mainly 4 roles. I'm going to explain those 4 roles. But before we go to those 4 roles, I'm just going to explain brief terminology. Let's say IP, protocol. You just need to know this. IP, protocol, ICF, CRF, ICH, GCP, CFR. You know FDA, Food Drug Administration. It is a regulatory body in US. Each country will have their own regulatory authorities, regulatory bodies. So basically they review the data and they will decide whether to approve the drug further. IP, it is also called IMP. So this is investigational medicinal product, also called investigational product. That means the product which is under research, product which is under study, product which is under investigation. It is called investigational product. Also called investigational medicinal product. Protocol is set of rules or set of procedures, methodologies, based on which your entire clinical trial will be done. In short, we can call roadmap to conduct the clinical studies. So during clinical studies, everything should be as per the protocol. Okay. ICF, informed consent form. So this is the form by which we will be giving information to subject. Site people will give information to subject, and subject will decide based on the information. Subject will decide whether to participate or not to participate. If they are willing to participate, they'll sign the informed consent form. So information will be given to the subject. We'll take the consent from the subject. This is case report form. Case report form. Case report form, informed consent form, protocol. So this is investigational product. So case report form is a data collection form, data collection tool, which is available in paper and electronic. Nowadays, everyone is using electronic form. Okay. So this is the data collection tool, which is used to collect the data from the subjects. So ICH GCP, which is important, which is given in the E6 guidelines. ICH E6. will give you the guidelines for the GCP. So, International Council on Harmonization for Good Clinical Practice. Those guidelines are given in the E6. These are the GCP standards or the global standards. Global quality standard to manage all the activities of the clinical studies. So let's say you're conducting a clinical trial. You are the sponsor. You're conducting clinical trial. You'll definitely follow E6 guidelines. Whoever involved in the clinical trial, they must know E6 guidelines. E6 for good clinical practice. So any company conducting clinical trial, they should follow GCP guidelines. CFR. These are the FDA guidelines, FDA regulations. So Code of Federal Regulations. So these are the regulations given by the Federal Executive Department of US. Federal Department. We have a lot of titles here, 50 titles. Each title will give you guidelines into one particular area, into broad areas. We are not going to use all the titles. Title 21 deals with food and drug. Title 21 deals with food and drug. Anything related to food and drug, you will find in the title 21. FDA, you know, Food Drug Administration. Okay. So this is the basic terminology. Investigator, sponsor. Investigator is a physician, clinician, under whose personal supervision the drug will be administered to the subject. Medical doctor, under whose personal supervision drug will be given, drug will be administered. He is the one, he is responsible for overall conduct of clinical studies at the participating site. Okay. Sponsor, nothing but pharmaceutical companies, sponsoring companies who finance, who fund, who organize the clinical trials. Who organize the clinical trials. In the clinical trial team, there are 4 main roles, which is sponsor, CRA, sponsor the pharmaceutical company, biotech company, who fund, who finance who organize the clinical studies. Sometimes for conducting clinical studies, they outsource to other companies called contract research organization. It's a company contracted by the sponsor to manage clinical trial related activities. So sponsor, investigator, principal investigator, CRA, CRC, study coordinator. Clinical research coordinator is also called study coordinator. CRA is also called monitor, clinical monitor. Clinical research associate is also called monitor. Okay. So these are the 4 roles. Out of which, what exactly sponsor do? So sponsor will provide the product, all the necessary documents to the site. In the site, investigator will be responsible. So they will provide all the documents, investigational product to the investigator. Okay. And they are responsible, they're obliged to report each and every side effect, adverse effect to the regulatory authorities, to FDA. within the given timelines. And they're also responsible for recruiting the CRA, recruiting investigators, selecting the sites. They have to monitor the study and ensure the study is going on as per the regulations, as per the E6 guidelines, as per the FDA guidelines. Okay, so they should monitor the study, sponsor should monitor the study, and they should ensure that the trial in the clinical trial site is going on as per all the applicable regulations. To ensure that, to know what is going on at the site, they appoint CRAs. They appoint CRA. So CRA will visit the site, perform the monitoring, check the activities on behalf of the sponsor. So they visit the site where investigator is available. Check all these activities with the lot of monitoring activities will be there. I'll explain them. So they check all the activities with the investigator and they report it to sponsor. That is the reason CRA is called line of communication between the sponsor and the site investigator, institution. Is a line of communication between sponsor and the investigator. On behalf of the sponsor, CRA will visit the site, check all the details at the site, prepare a report, and communicate that report with the sponsor. They submit that report to sponsor. The complete life cycle of the clinical trial, throughout all the phases, all the stages of the clinical trial, CRA has to visit the site, check all the activities, make sure the study is going on as per the regulations, as per E6, as per the FDA regulations, as per the protocol, and then report it to sponsor. That is CRA. So CRA will not interact with the patients. CRC will interact with the patients. They are responsible for collecting data from the subjects. CRC, research coordinator. He look after day-to-day activities, daily activities at the site, report to investigator. Okay. So they interact with the patient, they recruit the patients, and they will collect the data from the subjects. Okay. So here, patients are called subjects. So CRC will interact with the patient, collect the data from them. But CRA more focus on the data which is already recorded. So they're not going to interact with the patient. They'll interact with the lab, they'll interact with the CRCs, investigators. Check all the activities. Okay. CRA is also called monitor because he performed the variety of monitoring activities, clinical operations. He is called monitor. So that is the role of the monitor in the clinical trial process. Okay, he will be conducting different visits. They plan for the visits and they conduct the visits. So I'll be explaining those visits. So you know this process, clinical trial process. So this is the clinical trial team. You know, sponsor, investigator, CRA, CRC, clinical research coordinator. He is also called study coordinator. As you know this point, he is a line of communication between sponsor and the investigator. So sponsor, the person employed by the sponsor. CRA is a person employed by the sponsor to monitor the clinical study at all the participating sites. Sometimes one person responsible for more than one site, or sometimes one person responsible for only one site. It depends. So CRA play a critical role in success of a clinical trial, and CRA have responsibilities that cover full life cycle of the clinical trial, starting with the initiation visit. Okay, so starting with the initiation visit till closeout visits. So starting of the study till closeout of the study. You visit, work with the sites on behalf of the sponsor. So CRA monitor the study at the site and perform variety of clinical operations and monitoring activities. Okay, so CRA is the observer, documenter, conductor of the clinical study. So CRA responsibilities and title can vary widely depending upon the need of the sponsor. So you can see here some of the titles: clinical monitor, co-monitor, co-CRA, lead CRA, clinical trial specialist, site manager. Alternate names for the CRA, alternate job designations for the CRA. So clinical research associate works both at the clinical site and the sponsor location. During the clinical trial, CRA conducts regular visits, regular site visits, virtually, physically. So nowadays, all electronic documents. Some documents will be available electronically, online. So CRA will log into database and will check the data there. And sometimes they have to physically visit the site, travel, visit the site to ensure good progress record keeping on the clinical trial site. So CRA is more focused on the data, accuracy, quality control. So CRA more of looking at the recorded data which is already in the database. He will not interact with the patients. CRC will interact with the patients. Okay. And throughout the process, throughout the clinical trial, CRA will be conducting different visits. So site qualification visit. The site qualification visit means they will check whether site is good to conduct the studies. Whether site is good to conduct the studies. Mainly they select the site. Okay. So once they approve the site is good with all the equipments, with all the staff, but the site is ready to kickstart, then they'll start conduct site initiation study. Site initiation visit also will be there. They'll approve this, select the study site. After that, they visit for the site initiation. Okay. So before we start clinical trial, site initiation visit will happen. And periodic monitoring visits also will be done. Periodic monitoring visits also will be done. That means during the study also, during the conduct of the study, after site initiation, they start clinical trial. During the clinical trial also, they will be visiting the site at the different intervals. They plan and they visit the site at different intervals to monitor ongoing study. So it is monitoring visit, periodic monitoring visit. At the end of the study, they perform the closeout visit. At the end of the study, they perform the closeout visit. So throughout the life cycle of the clinical trial, CRA will be conducting 4 types of visits. Site qualification visit, site initiation visit, monitoring visit, site monitoring visit, and site closeout visit. So regular monitor visits will be broken down into 4 types. Pre-study, initiation, monitoring, closeout. So this FQV, pre-study qualification visit, pre-study qualification visit, site qualification visit, also called pre-study qualification visit. So these are conducted to determine if the investigator and the site, so whether the investigator and site have capability to conduct the study. During this visit, both investigator and CRC, both must be present. CRC investigator must be present at the site. Okay. Next, initiation visit they'll perform. So in the initiation visit, what they do? So this is the last step. Initiation visit is the last step before the study site is activated for the enrollment. After this, they can start enrolling the subjects. Okay. So this site initiation visit is when the research team receives adequate training from the sponsor or CRO on the protocol. That means CRA will check whether the site team trained on the protocol, whether they know how to conduct the clinical trial, whether they are aware the protocol contents. Okay. Whether investigator, whoever conducting the study, whether they understand their responsibilities. Okay. And whether we have approval from the FDA. Okay. So then after this, we'll start enrolling the subjects into the study. So this is initiation visit. In the initiation visit, they check all these, whether they are aware of the protocol, whether investigator is eligible to conduct the study, whether training is given to the site team, whether we have approval, whether the site has approval to conduct the studies. Then they perform the monitoring visit. Once study starts, they perform monitoring visits. They develop the plan, monitoring plan. Okay. So in the monitoring plan, they will include frequency, duration of the visit. How frequent monitoring visit has to happen, duration of the each visit. The main focus of this visit is to evaluate whether the study conducted, that means the way how the study being conducted, and also will do the verification of the data. As study starts, they'll collect the data from the subjects. So that collected data will be verified by the CRA. Then the closeout visit will happen. When the study has been completed at the site, then the closeout visit will occur. Okay. So these are all the type of visits. Regardless of the type of visit, anyway they perform all these 4 types of visits, they will plan and they'll perform, they'll conduct. Regardless of the type of visit, when CRA is at the site, trial site, there are many study related activities. There are many study related activities. Okay, they check for the enrollment process. They check for enrollment process. And they check for the standards, informed consent process, protocol adherence, data entry, medication distribution, regimen compliance, quality response, regulatory compliance, reporting of adverse events. Apart from the, regardless of type of visit, when they are at the clinical site, they'll be checking all these. In the next class, I'm going to explain each of these details. What is the process of enrollment, protocol adherence, all this terminology, and in each step, what exactly they check. In the each step, what exactly CRA check, I'm going to explain. So this I'm going to show you in the next class. Okay. So this is the main role of the CRA. So the curriculum goes like this. The curriculum goes like this. First, we will learn the clinical trial theory. In the clinical trial theory, I'm going to explain the basic process, which will include, the process will include the designs of the clinical study. So CRA must know the designs of the clinical studies. So I'm going to cover the designs, blinding design, randomization design, and all. So that means this process, preclinical to marketing process, I'm going to again explain, but with the examples in detail. In detail, we are going to discuss the complete clinical trial process, which will cover the phases, designs, types. So I'm going to explain the designs mainly, and CRF contents I'm going to explain. Clinical research associate mainly check the data on the CRF. That means they must have knowledge on the each and every content of the case report form. I'm going to explain case report forms with the good examples. Okay. They must have knowledge on the protocol contents also. They will check whether the study is going on as per the protocol. They'll ensure the study is going on as per the protocol. They know the protocol contents. They should know the protocol content. This protocol contents also I'm going to explain with the example. So for this, I'm going to give you 2 to 3 examples. For this also, I'm going to give you 2 to 3 examples. Okay. Protocol contents. And all the guidelines. So guidelines, FDA regulations. So guidelines and regulations will be explained here. And in the CRA, once we complete the clinical research general details, then we'll enter into CRA. In the CRA, the role of the CRA. And I'm going to cover in each site visit, as we discussed, 4 types of visits. In each visit, what exactly CRA do? Site selection, site confirmation, source data verification. What are all the documents required, essential documents? During monitoring visit, they prepare the monitoring report. So what exactly the contents of the report, monitoring report contents? The role of CRA, including all the visits. What exactly they do in all the 4 types of visits. CRA should know E6 guidelines. I'm going to cover the E6. FDA guidelines, CFR guidelines. They should know ethics of the clinical trial. They also should know the product management, IMP management, storage of the product, dispensing the product, breaking the codes of the product, unblinding the product. So retrieval of the product, return of the product, SOP for all these, SOP for the IP management. They also should know the safety reporting, adverse event terminology, and safety reporting guidelines. Adverse event reporting, safety reporting means. So AE reporting timeframes, guidelines, and the terminology. They should know, and SOP for the safety reporting. Standard operating procedures, SAP means. And they also should know the essential documents. So what are all the documents required during the study, before the study, before we start the study, during the study, and completion of the study. After completion of the study, what are all the documents? What are all the essential documents required? So that is also will be covered. They do source data verification, that I'll cover. Source data verification in paper as well in electronic. Both will be covered. So CRA will log into EDC systems. I'm going to cover data collection methods. Data collection methods. And how they log into EDC, how they check the data, how they verify the data. They cross-check with the source documents. So I will explain the source documents, also how they perform the SDV by logging into EDC. This is hands-on. This will be covered hands-on. So how CRA log into database and how they check the data also will be explained. So data validation by cross-checking with the source documents also explained. Okay. So this all will be covered: quality process, query process, validation, and the query process. Okay. Site initiation process, site selection process, especially in the IP management, what we are going to cover: randomization, blinding, unblinding process, collecting data after closeout visits. So informed consent form, ICF. So this all will be covered in the CRA. So with respect to hands-on, this will be given on hands-on. So we have access to EDC, how they log into EDC and how they check the data, how they verify the data with the source documents. Okay. So this will take 5 to 6 weeks. Duration of the courses, 5 to 6 weeks. Okay. So notes will be given for this. Recording links will be given. And resume preparation, sample resumes will be given. Okay. Assessments will be done. Assessments will be conducted. Mock interviews, interview questions. Okay. Hands-on training on EDC, electronic data capture. So this is a basic curriculum and also what I'm going to cover during this 5 to 6 weeks. And these are all the features. Right. So I have done with the demo session. In case if you have any questions, please you can unmute and you can ask. So regardless of type of visit, when the CRA is at the clinical trial site, there are many study related activities. They'll anyway visit before you select the site, before you start the study, ongoing study, before you close the study. They'll be conducting anyway 4 types of visits. So regardless of the type of visit, when CRA visiting the site, they will be checking the following study related activities. Okay. They will check enrollment process. That means is the site enrolling qualified participants? Is the site enrolling qualified participants? Qualified subjects. So how do we check this qualification of the subject? So they will check whether investigator is enrolling qualified participants. Investigator will make the enrollment plan. Investigator is the one who conduct the clinical trial at the site, is a qualified doctor. He is also responsible for making the recruitment plan. They are responsible for recruiting the subjects. But CRA will check whether investigator is recruiting eligible subjects, eligible participants. But how do we check this eligibility? Okay. So mainly they check whether site enrolling qualified participants. So they will review inclusion-exclusion criteria. They will review inclusion-exclusion criteria. Okay. So this is called eligibility criteria. This is called eligibility criteria. I'm going to explain that. So let's say inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria. So we'll have inclusion, we'll have exclusion. This inclusion exclusion will be clearly given in the protocol, clinical protocol. What is protocol? Protocol is a document. It's a set of rules based on which your entire clinical trial will be done. Your entire clinical trial will be well explained in the protocol. So protocol is a roadmap to conduct clinical trial. So this eligibility criteria also will be given in the protocol. So this into two categories, inclusion, exclusion. So we'll have set of questions in inclusion, we'll have set of questions in exclusion. Let's take the example. So mine is study on pain, back pain. Study on back pain. What is the main inclusion criteria? So what type of people that we recruit? People who are suffering from the back pain. So we'll include that in the inclusion. Is the patient suffering from back pain? Suffering from back pain. So since 6 months or 4 months, 5 months, whichever. Yes, no. Answer, yes, no. Every inclusion question, every exclusion question will have the responses yes, no. Let's say another inclusion you see. So I would like to I would like to recruit, as per my study, I would like to recruit the patients whose ages in between 20 and 70. So as the patient age in between, is the patient age in between 20 and 70. In between 20 and 70. Answer is yes or no. So all the inclusion questions should be selected yes. All the inclusion questions should be selected yes. All the exclusion should be selected no. Let's say I don't want to recruit the pregnant women. So is the patient pregnant? Yes or no? Is the patient lactating? Yes or no? Answer should be selected no here. For the inclusion, answer should be selected yes. So this should be yes, this should be no. So if Any of the inclusion criteria? No. Any of the exclusion criteria? Yes. We will not recruit the patients, but anyway, we'll have protocol waivers. In case of the protocol wavering is given, we'll ignore that. We'll ignore the particular question. That we'll discuss later, protocol wavering. Most of the time, inclusion should be yes, exclusion should be no. So if inclusion is no, if exclusion is selected yes, will not recruit that particular subject. So the entire inclusion exclusion will be given in the protocol. Your protocol will define this. Okay. And this will be collected on the CRF also, case report forms. Okay. So on the case report form is a data collection form, which is used to collect the data from the subjects. Which data? Clinical trial data. So this is how it looks, CRF look. So I'm going to show you, this is inclusion exclusion. Your entire clinical trial data will be collected on the case report forms. See here how inclusion exclusion explained. Inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria. We have yes or no. Here also we have yes or no. Answer should be selected yes to all these inclusion. Answer should be selected no to all these exclusion. So this is inclusion exclusion criteria. Investigator will be following this inclusion exclusion. According to this only, they'll be recruiting the subject. But CRA will verify whether investigator is following the inclusion exclusion criteria which is given in the protocol. So whether he is recruiting qualified participants. Okay. So this is the point that they check, CRA check. We have informed consent procedure. So what is ICF? This is ICF, informed consent form. So what process being used to obtain and manage the informed consent forms? So how do you obtain the informed consent form from the subject? How do you maintain that? Okay. So whether this informed consent form obtained from the subject before the participation, that part will be checked by the CRA. So CRA will check whether the informed consent form is obtained before the subject participation into the clinical study. So that complete informed consent process will be checked by the CRA. So what is informed consent process? It is the process by which participants voluntarily confirms his willingness to participate in the clinical trial. They will confirm their willingness to participate in the clinical trial. For that, we need to explain the study. Site people has to explain the study. Okay. So study objectives, purpose, duration, risk, benefits, compensations. These are all will be included as part of informed consent form. It has two parts: information sheet, consent sheet. Information sheet, consent sheet. Okay. In the information sheet, we'll provide the information about the study. In the consent sheet, we'll get the signature. Okay. So this is what they check. CRA will check whether informed consent form is obtained before the participation of the subject. Okay. Next, protocol adherence. So every clinical study that you're conducting, it should be conducted as per the GCP, good clinical practice, which are given by the ICH. Okay. So clinical trials should be conducted according to GCP, according to the ethical principles, according to FDA regulations, according to protocol. So protocol, GCP, FDA regulations, okay, and regulatory requirements. So CRA will check, are there any deviation from the protocol? Are there any deviation from the protocol? Okay. So that means whether the protocol is followed, whether study is conducted with adhere to protocol, with consistent with the protocol. Okay. That part CRA will check. So any activity that has to be done according to protocol. So if any deviation from the protocol, violation from the protocol. Okay. So that is what the protocol adherence. Any deviation from the protocol, investigator will be reporting this deviation on the CRF. The deviations also should be checked by the CRA. Any deviation that should be reported on the case report forms, data collection forms, that should be reviewed by the CRA. Data entry. So who will enter the data first? First question, who entered the data? Data entry is nothing but entering the data. Okay. Entering the data into CRF, case report forms. They will check, CRF will visit and check, is the site entering the data completely, accurately, and also in the timely manner. Okay. So that is what the data entry. Data entry will be done by the site. So is the site entering the data completely, accurately, in the timely manner? That will be checked by the CRA. Okay. And medication distribution. So what is this medication here? It's a IP, investigational product. Investigational product. So medication distribution. So is the site carefully managing, distributing the study medication? Okay. So CRA will check, is the site carefully managing, distributing the study medication? They check about the management of the IP, and they also check about the distribution of the IP, study product. Okay. So IP is an investigational product. Medication here it's called investigational product. So this investigational product will be, information about the product will be documented. So let's say regimen compliance. In the medication distribution, CRA will check, is the site managing and distributing the study medication properly? Next, they check for the regimens. So they check for regimen compliance or the subject complying with the medication regimen that they have assigned. So whatever the regimen details given to the subject, where the subject is following all these details while taking the drug, or the subject complying with the medication regimen that they have been assigned. Regimen details will be checked by the CRA, regimen compliance, whether the patients are taking the drug in compliance with the guidelines protocol. So the next, query response. Okay. Next, query response. So when do we get the query? What is query first? So query will be generated by the mostly clinical data management teams. Okay, so this is a process you see. So initially your data will be collected on the case report forms. Your site will collect the data. Okay, this data is raw data. This data is raw data. This data is inconsistent data, illogical data, incomplete data. Okay. So this data we cannot directly submit to FDA because whatever the data you're collecting, it will be from many sources from more than one place. Okay. So site will be collecting the data on the forms called CRF, case report forms. This is available in paper and electronic. Okay. So this data, whatever the data that you're collecting on the CRF is raw data. The data need to be validated. So we'll take the help of CDM. So CDM will make sure that the data is clean, complete, accurate, consistent, and in the logical sequence. When they generate a query, in order to identifying the discrepancies, in order to identify the raw data. So in order to close the discrepancies, okay. So when they are managing the data, they may find the queries. These queries will be communicated with the site. So whether the site answer the questions properly. Does the site answer the questions properly? Okay. So this is the data process. So ultimately, your data will be captured into CDM databases. When they are managing data, they'll generate a query. That query will be communicated with the site. Site has to answer the query. But the site answer the query promptly. That will be checked by the CRA. So they will check query response. They will also check regulatory compliance. So they check protocol compliance. They also check the regulatory compliance. They also check the medication compliance, regimen compliance. So are there necessary legal regulatory documents completed accurately and filed? So are the necessary legal and regulatory documents completed correctly and filed? Okay. Next, adverse event reporting. So what do they do in adverse event reporting? So in adverse event reporting, so are all the adverse events being properly logged and reported? So let's say, first of all, what is AE? So what is adverse event? So what is adverse event and when can we call it as serious? Adverse events unwanted, unintended, untoward medical occurrence. It is called adverse event. When adverse event results in death, life-threatening. Okay. So death, fatal, same. Hospitalization. Initial hospitalization and prolonged hospitalization. Initial as well prolonged. Okay. Permanent disability. Permanent disability. Birth defects. MIE, medically important event. Medically important event. MIE. Okay. So if any of these happens, any of this occurs, the adverse event is called serious adverse event. So, are the adverse events being properly logged, reported? We'll have certain timelines to submit these adverse events. Okay. So each and every adverse event will have their timelines to submit. Okay. So we'll report adverse event to regulatory authorities. That means pharma companies are obliged to submit each and every adverse event to the regulatory authorities. Okay. Or the serious adverse event being sent to IRB. They'll check are the adverse events being properly logged and reported. Also, are the serious adverse event being sent to IRB. So each adverse event, especially if it is serious, it should be communicated with the sponsor 24 hours. Investigator to sponsor 24 hours. Sponsor to regulatory authorities within 7 days. If it is fatal, life-threatening, 7 days. Okay. So investigator to IRB. IRB stands for Institutional Review Board, also called IEC, Independent Ethical Committees. Okay, so this is within 10 days. Whether CRA will check whether adverse events are timely reported and whether adverse events are reported to the respective destination, to the IRB, to the FDA, to the sponsor. Okay. So this is what the adverse event reporting. So CRA will check all these. This is what CRA will check. See the overall process. CRA will check whether the site is enrolling eligible subjects. In informed consent form, you see whether informed consent is obtained before the patient participation in the clinical study. Whether informed consent process properly done or not. Protocol adherence. Are there any deviations from the protocol? If yes, those deviations should be recorded on the CRF. That should be checked by the CRA. Should be reviewed by CRA. Data entry. So is the site entering the data completely, accurately, in timely manner? Completely, accurately, and in the timely manner. Medication distribution. Is the site carefully managing, distributing the study medication? Regimen compliance. Are the subject complying with the medication regimen that they have been assigned? So query response. Does the site answer the questions promptly? And regulatory compliance. Are the necessary legal regulatory documents completed? Okay, correctly and filed. Whether it is completed correctly and filed. So are all the adverse events being properly logged and reported? Or serious adverse events being sent to IRB? Okay. So these are all they check in the insight. Okay. So they anyway do all these type of visits before we start the clinical study, during the clinical study, close out, before you close the study. Before you start the study, we have two visits: site qualification visit, site initiation visit. So site qualification will help you to decide whether the site is eligible for the study participation. Initiation, they will check before initiating the study, they'll check the requirements. Monitoring visit, ongoing clinical trial, they'll be visiting the site, checking the details at the defined intervals. Okay. So regardless of those visits, CRA will verify all these. Good evening, all of you. Last class we discussed about the CRA activities. That means what exactly CRA check when he is at the site, regardless of type of visits. We just listed the types of visits. We didn't discuss in detail about type of visits. Regardless of the type of visits, what are all the CRA check at the site? They check a lot of activities, study-related activities at the site. We discussed in detail all these activities in the last class. Today, what we are going to discuss, in each monitoring site, in each monitoring visit. So what are all the points? What are all the activities that the CRA monitor? Okay. So CRA visits will be categorized into 4 types: site qualification visit, site initiation visit, monitoring visit, closeout visit. So this is done before you select the study, before you select the study site. Site qualification will mainly check whether the site is qualified, whether the site has all the requirements to perform the clinical study. We'll check that. Site initiation, before we start the study, what are all the things to check? Monitoring study. This is ongoing. Once study started, in different periods, different intervals, CRA will monitor the study. Closeout. At the end of the study, we'll perform the closeout visits. So we are going to discuss in detail all these CRA visits. Okay. So monitoring in the clinical trial. So let us learn first what is monitoring. So here you can observe ICH GCP section 5.18 I have mentioned. That means in the GCP guidelines, we have fifth point in that 18th section is giving you the definition of the monitoring. GCP is a good clinical practice. What is ICH? International Council of Harmonization. So International Council of Harmonization for good clinical practice. So this is a global unified standard for the conducting clinical studies. Any clinical trial should be, when you're conducting any clinical trial, it should be as per the GCP, good clinical practice. So we have these GCP guidelines in E6. GCP guidelines in E6, you can see. Integrated addendum to ICH E6. Guideline for the good clinical practice. E6 guideline for good clinical practice. So we have a lot of guidelines here. See, glossary, principles, IRB responsibility, investigate responsibility, sponsor responsibility, monitor responsibilities, contents of protocol, okay, IB contents. What are all the documents which are required to know? So which are used before the clinical trial, during the clinical trial, after the clinical trial. So we'll discuss, first of all, in terms of monitoring, we are going to discuss. So study sites are monitored to ensure the oversight of the clinical study by the sponsor. Because sponsor has to monitor, sponsor has to know, in fact, what is going on at each site. So they appoint CRA, Clinical Research Associate. They appoint the CRA, ask them to go and visit the site, check all the details, activities at the site, and report it back to sponsor. In that way, sponsor will oversee what is happening at the site. So what is monitoring? The act of overseeing the progress of the clinical trial and ensuring that the trial is conducting, recording, reporting in according with the GCP guidelines, according with protocol, according with the SOP, standard operating procedures. Also according to regulatory requirements, concerned regulatory requirements. If it is in US, FDA guidelines, FDA regulations. So monitoring is nothing but overseeing the progress of the clinical studies. So why do we need to monitor? To ensure the study is going on as per protocol, SOP, GCP, and regulatory requirements. What is the purpose of monitoring? Mainly 3 points. When we are discussing about purpose, we have mainly 3 points. The first point, important point, to protect rights and well-being of the human subjects. Protection of rights, well-being of the human subjects, mainly patient safety. Also, the data that is whatever generated, data whatever collected. So we'll ensure the data is accurate. That means by monitoring the study, we'll ensure the trial data is accurate, complete, verifiable from the source documents. Also, the overall conduct of clinical trial is as per the protocol, GCP, applicable regulatory requirements. So by monitoring the study, we'll ensure these 3 points: patient safety, data is accurate, complete, verifiable as per the source documents, and conduct of clinical trial is in compliance with the applicable regulations. Okay. So qualities of the good monitor. CRA must be appropriately trained. He must be trained. He must have adequate knowledge, clinical and scientific knowledge. So this will be documented with the resume, CV, training logs and CVs. Whether he's appropriately trained, whether he has the adequate knowledge. So this will be documented with the training logs and maintaining CVs. So monitors should thoroughly familiar with these concepts. They must have knowledge on the product. What is IMP? IMP is a investigational medicinal product. It is also called IP, investigational product. Also called IMP, investigational medicinal product. So thoroughly familiar with the property, thoroughly familiar with all these concepts. So they must know the IMP, accountability of drug, how much amount of received, how much amount of used, how much amount returned, accountability. Drug accountability, drug storage conditions, temperature conditions. So they must aware of the product dispensing the product. They must even aware of the SOPs for the product, maintenance of product, standard operating procedures for IP. So they also must be familiar with the protocol. So protocol objectives, protocol designs, protocol endpoints. Okay. So these are all duration of the protocol, study treatment periods, including follow-up periods. So they must be familiar with the protocol contents. Further, we are going to discuss the protocol with the example, protocol contents with the example. So consent forms. Consent form is informed consent form. So you already know this, we already discussed. It's a form by which we'll be giving information to subject and subject will sign the form stating that their participation is voluntary participation. That is consent form, informed consent form. So they also must be familiar with the SOPs, sponsor SOPs, site SOPs, trial SOPs. GCP. They must be aware of GCP, good clinical practice. They also must have knowledge on the local laws, regulations, local language, local regulatory guidelines. So these are all the monitor should aware of. And what is the nature of the monitoring, extent of monitoring? So this will be basically defined by the sponsor. So monitoring should be proportionate to objective, purpose, design, blinding, size, complexity, outcome measures, risk. Let's see, it is explained in the 5.18.3. So 5.18 about monitoring. 5.18.3 extent, nature of the monitoring. So the sponsor should ensure the trials are adequately monitored, and sponsor should determine extent and nature of the monitoring. So it should be based, determination of this monitoring is based on the considerations like objective, purpose, design, complexity, blinding, size, endpoints of the clinical trial. These all will be given in the protocol. Objectives, purpose, primary, secondary objective, purpose, why are we conducting this study? Designs, we'll have different designs. Placebo control, active control, randomized. Based on the blinding, we have designs. Blinding, single, double, triple blindings. Blinding is nothing but it's a process where one or more parties are not aware of the treatment. Size, endpoints, what kind of parameters that you require to analyze the data. That will be given in the endpoints. Okay. So these are all I'm going to discuss by giving example. These are all comes under protocol contents. I'll take 1 to 2 examples for the protocol, and I'm going to explain all the contents of the protocol. So in general, there is a need for the on-site monitoring before, during, after the trial. And sponsor may determine that the central monitoring in conjunction with the procedures like investigator training, meetings, extensive written guidance, so that can assure appropriate conduct of trial in compliance with GCP. Okay. So on-site monitoring anyway required before, after, during clinical trial. Okay. So central monitoring is required in conjunction with all these procedures, investigator training, meetings, and all. Okay. So those are all types of monitoring. Let's see. First, let us go with the slides. So central monitoring. We have types of monitoring: central monitoring, risk-based monitoring, on-site monitoring. Okay. So this is a new one, risk-based monitoring. Previously, it was 100% check. It was 100% monitoring. Okay. But nowadays, the concept of risk-based monitoring is familiar. So that means instead of checking each and every point, that will take a lot of time, checking each and every point, which may not be required sometimes. Checking each and every activity, each and every point may not be required sometimes. So we approach risk-based monitoring. That means certain points we check, which are more important. That is called risk-based monitoring. On-site monitoring, risk-based monitoring, central monitoring. 3 types we have. Let's see the central monitoring. Determination of key eligibility criteria. So you know already, eligibility criteria falls into 2 categories, inclusion, exclusion. What kind of subjects to be included, what kind of subjects to be excluded. This eligibility criteria will be determined by collecting consent form, by screening all the patient medical records, scan, X-ray, ECG, pathology reports, okay, patient surgical notes, also statistics, unusual patterns of the data. So we'll check these. Risk-based monitoring, limited sources should be used to where the monitoring is really required, important. So this is for the subject protection, reliability of the trial results, and protection of the future patients. So risk-based approach will be achieved through 6 points. First, identify the risk, evaluate the risk, then based on the risk, we'll establish risk control methods, risk minimization plans. And at the same time, risk will be communicated to the parties. Review will be done. Then risk reporting will be done. Okay. So this is risk-based approach. So risk-based monitoring means we'll not check each and every point. We'll check main point. So which is really important, really necessary to establish the 3 points to protect the subjects, to make sure the data is reliable. Okay. And the trial is conducting as per the regulations. To make sure these 3 points, what are all the main areas to check? On-site monitoring. So when they visit the site, what are all they check? They check for the training, whether the clinical trial staff trained adequately, whether the training is given to them on the protocol. That means whether they are aware of the protocol, they are aware of the protocol contents. So whether they are trained on the protocol. Access to necessary documents. Whether they have access to necessary documents, confirm. So whether pharmacy and the lab resources in place to check the accountability of drug, to check the dispensing of the product, to check the storage of the product. Whether pharmacy and lab resources to perform the lab results, lab test. Adherence to protocol, whether study is going on as per the protocol, as per the GCP. Is there any protocol deviation? Is there any non-compliance with the protocol and GCP? They check the patient medical records, eligibility, consent forms, adverse events, CRFs. They do source data verification. So what is source data verification? Basically, your data on the CRF will be collected from the source documents. So verifying the data which is already entered into CRF with the source. It is called source data verification. Verifying the data which is already entered into systems with the source documents. That is on-site monitoring. So at the site, they'll be checking all these. Before monitoring visit, what are all they ensured they check. During monitoring visit, what are all they check. After monitoring visit, what are all they check. Before the visit, they review the status of data entry. Okay. Before the visit, they review the status of data entry and what are all the what action item, review the action item from the last visit. That means any query from the last visit, any pending action from the last visits. So review regulatory binder. Regulatory binder is a place where we have all the documents, regulatory approvals and all. Review that binder with all the documents. Check principal investigator and site staff availability. Check principal investigator. That means when they are visiting the site, whether the principal investigator, coordinator, other site people available or not. They get internal team approvals before monitoring. And they send the confirmation of the visit that they are visiting so and so day. When they come to the site, they'll be checking all these: staffing, site, research lab, other facilities. They check for the facilities, they discuss about these facilities, and they also check for the regulatory files, other study records. They check the clinical procedures. What are all the procedures that they're following? Any problems, any deviations, any issues. At the end of the visit, they debrief. After completion of the site visit, they'll complete the report, monitoring report, and they provide this report to the sponsor. They provide the report to sponsor. Okay. So there are 4 types of visits. So regular site monitor visits can be broken into 4 types: pre-study visits, site initiation visit, periodic monitoring visit. These are the routine visits. And closeout visits. Okay. So site can also be monitored, audited by the FDA, CRO, IRB, sponsor. Study sites may also be monitored, audited by the FDA. That means FDA will audit, conduct the inspections, CRO will audit, IRB will do that, will monitor the study, and sponsor also will monitor the study. Sponsor or CRO. So first one we'll discuss. First one is a site qualification visit. The main purpose of this visit is to check the site qualification, whether the site is qualified to conduct the clinical trial, whether it has capability to conduct the clinical trial. So pre-study visits, it is also called site selection visits. So we'll select the appropriate site here. Also called site qualification visit. We'll check whether the site is capable to conduct the study. So these visits are conducted to determine if the investigator and site have capability to conduct the study. So during this visit, investigator, coordinator must be available. So when the CRA performing this visit at the site, investigator and study coordinator must be available. In case if applicable, pharmacy staff also need to be available. So monitor will usually requesting tour of the facility, time to discuss basic fundamentals of the protocol. So they will request a tour of facility and time to discuss basic fundamentals of the protocol and how relate to the feasibility of recruiting potential subjects. So how to recruit the participants and how protocol helps in determining the eligibility criteria. Okay. So what are all other topics to discuss during pre-study visits? So we'll check, CRA will check for the investigator qualification, investigator responsibilities, other site persons like CRC, lab persons and all. Even we check the, like CRA will check for the other site person responsibilities like qualifications also. They check the study objective. They check study procedures. They also check the patient eligibility criteria. And they also check patient recruitment procedures. These are all you will get in protocol only. So most, the common objectives are safety efficacy. What are all procedures that they are following? They are going to follow. Inclusion exclusion criteria. And how the patients are going to be recruited. Is it direct recruitment, by releasing advertisements, or patient referrals, physician referrals, patient referrals, recruitment process. Okay. They also check for the IRB, Institutional Review Board, also called Independent Ethical Committees. Okay. So they will discuss the IRB, like what are all the consent requirements, protocol contents. So basically, clinical trial related documents will be reviewed and approved by the IRB. Okay. Reporting, adverse event reporting. Adverse events should be submitted to the regulatory authorities in the given time frames. Each company obliged to submit each and every adverse event in the timely manner to the regulatory authorities. So they even check for the reporting timelines, reporting procedures, reporting forms. They check for the source documents. Basically, your data is collected into a source document. This is the first time collection. So first data will be collected on the source. From source, your data will be collected into CRF, case report forms. So they check for the source documents. Source documents available in paper, electronic. They check for the space requirements. Availability of secure area where we can store the drug, devices, equipments. So they check all these points during qualification visit. Pre-study visit. It is also called site selection visit. Based on all these discussions, we'll choose the site. In the site selection, these are all they check. Experience, patient pool they will check, time, human resource, technical, infrastructure, geographical location of the site, qualification of investigators and other staff. So fee, acceptance of requirements, study requirements. Okay. These are all they check. After the site pre-study site, we'll go with the site initiation visit. Site initiation visit. The first one, site selection visit. will choose the site. After that, initiation visit. So it is when the study team receives training from the sponsor or CRA. So the entire team must be trained on the protocol. Team must be trained on the protocol. Initiation visit will start when the team receives training from the sponsor. Training is on the protocol. So it is also an opportunity for the sponsor to ensure the investigator fully understand the responsibilities. This is given in FDA regulation. FDA regulations are CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, which is in 21. What is CFR? Code of Federal Regulations. So this will give you the regulations in different areas, many broad areas. Title 1, 2, 3, up to Title 50 we have. Each title of this CFR will give you guidelines into one particular area. Title 1, one area, Title 2, banking, Title 3, agreement, Title 4, like that. I'm not giving the exact titles. So general requirements, general provisions, grants and agreements, president, Title 3 president, Title 2 grants and agreements. Okay. So like this, for banking, one title, agriculture, one title. But out of all these, 21 is the title which are related to the food and drug. In that, 312 subpart D. So this will give you the guidelines for the investigator responsibilities. So it is an opportunity for the sponsor to ensure that the investigator fully understand their responsibility when they are in clinical trial. Site initiation visit. The main purpose of this visit is to uniformly provide the study specific information to the investigator. Provide uniform information about the study to investigator and the study staff before the study started. And reassess the resources, capability. So resources and capability, we check in the pre-study visits only. But before we start the study, we'll again recheck, reassess the resources and capability to conduct the study. Okay. So monitor will meet with the study staff to discuss obligations, research obligations under GCP. Okay, monitor will meet the study staff and will discuss following points. Investigator responsibilities, administrative responsibilities. What are all the approvals? IRB approvals, approvals from IRB to conduct the clinical study, communications. Okay, further communications will be established. Regulatory file requirements. So what are all the documents in the regulatory binder? It's a place where we can save all the regulatory files. So file requirements, informed consent form and process. Okay. Discuss about informed consent forms and process of informed consent. Protocol, if any change in the protocol. We'll discuss about the source documents. What are all the source documents that they are going to use? Paper also is available in, so source documents also available in paper and electronic. e-source will be there. Product handling, accountability of the product, storage conditions, temperature conditions, how much amount of drug is used, how much amount of drug remained, and safety reporting points also will check. Okay. The guide reporting timelines, how often we report, where to report, how to report, and protocol specific training. We'll discuss about protocol specific training and archiving of the study documents. How do we store these documents? So all the necessary documents, where do we save? Where do we store? Okay, so this is all. During the initiation visit, they check all these points. They discuss all these points. So monitor will, during the initiation visit, monitor will review sponsor policies. Sponsor also review, like monitor also review sponsor policies, standards, and procedure for conduct of clinical trials. Review what are all the standards. Review what are all the laws, regulations given by the company. Review the sponsor policies, standards, and what are all the procedures to conduct the clinical studies. And also reassess site facilities. Reassess site facilities and reassess other resources also. So reassess site facility and provide additional guidance to the site. Provide additional guidance to the site. Okay. So they will review the policies and standards procedures. They reassess the site facility. They reassess the resources which are enough to conduct the trial and provide additional guidance to the site. Okay, these are all during the initiation visit that the monitor will check. So monitor will meet the study staff to discuss all these, all the points. Okay. So this is qualification visit and this is initiation visit, site initiation. Okay. So we already discussed about types of monitoring. How many types? On-site monitoring, risk-based monitoring, central monitoring. We'll just look at the E6. So all are explained here, on-site monitoring and all. We'll just have a look at this one. This is addendum to nature and extent of the monitoring. So sponsor should develop a systematic, prioritized, risk-based approach. Systematic, prioritized, risk-based approach to monitor the clinical studies. Okay, we already discussed this one. Okay, not this one above one we'll discuss. So flexibility in extent and nature of the monitoring described in the section is intended to permit varied approaches that they improve the effectiveness, efficiency of the monitoring. The sponsor may choose on-site monitoring, combination of central and on-site monitoring. So where justified, only centralized monitoring. So on-site monitoring, combination of on-site centralized monitoring, only centralized monitoring. Okay, so sponsor should document the rationale for the choosing to chosen monitoring strategy. Generally, we'll have monitoring plan also. Okay. On-site monitoring is performed. On-site monitoring is performed at the site at which clinical trial being conducted. On-site monitoring typically will be done at the site where the clinical research is going on. So centralized monitoring is the remote evaluation of accumulating data. Centralized monitoring is a remote evaluation of accumulating data performed in a timely manner and supported by the qualified trained persons like managers, statisticians. So centralized monitoring is remote evaluation. On-site monitoring is at the site where the clinical research is going on. So centralized monitoring process provide additional monitoring capabilities so that can complement, reduce the extent and frequency of the on-site monitoring. Centralized monitoring process provide additional monitoring capabilities so that they can reduce on-site monitorings, frequency of on-site monitoring. Helps distinguish between reliable data, unreliable data. So this is raw check. So they may include the statistical analysis, accumulating data from the centralized monitorings. So that can be used to identify the missing data, inconsistent data, data outliers, unexpected lack of variability, protocol deviations, any non-compliance with the protocol. Examine the data trends like range, consistency, variability of data within the sites, across the sites. Evaluate for the systematic, significant errors in data collection, reporting at the site, across the site. And analyze site characteristics, performance metrics. Select the sites for targeted site monitoring, on-site monitoring. So those are all given here. So risk-based monitoring, on-site monitoring, centralized monitoring. Okay. So this is what the types of monitoring, types of visits. So we discussed 2 visits. Site qualification visit, site initiation visit. Then periodic monitoring visits will start as and when they start the study. Before that, we have 2, qualification, initiation. So once we start initiating the study, in the regular intervals, periodic monitoring visits will happen. Okay. Closeout monitoring visits we'll see in the next class. Okay. On the same slides we are going to discuss. Continuation slides we have. Okay, so we discussed till this one, site qualification, initiation. Next we have periodic monitoring visit and closeout visits. So this will take major part. Periodic monitoring visits, major part. We'll continue with this next class. Role of CRA, we started discussing with the types of visits also, right? So monitor visits break down into 4 types. qualification visit, initiation visit, site qualification, site initiation, periodic visits. Also we did. So also we have a site closeout visit. Out of 4, we did with first 2 visits, isn't it? First qualification visit, initiation visit. Today we are going to do monitoring visits. Okay, interim visits, routine visits. Okay, periodic monitoring visits. That means once the study started, once the site started conducting the clinical trial, monitor will, at the regular frequency, at the defined frequency, monitor will visit the site and check the details, check the activities of the site. Okay. So periodic monitoring visits. So sponsor or CRO will develop monitoring plan. Sponsor or CRO will develop the monitoring plan. That include at what frequency monitor has to visit and duration of the visit. How often, at what frequency monitor has to visit and duration of each visit. So the focus of this particular visit is to evaluate the way the study is being conducted, and also they do the source data verification. They do the source data verification even at remotely also. Remotely also they check. They'll have access to the electronic data captures. Okay. And they also have access to the source documents and they will compare. So what is source data verification? Verifying the data which is already entered into CRF with the source documents. Source documents will be original document where the data is collected for the first time. First information. Very first information. Okay, so we'll verify the data on the CRF with the source documents. So it is important to be familiar with the contract agreements. It is important to be familiar with the contract agreements as they may contain the agreement as to the frequency, duration of the site monitoring visits. Sponsor data entry expectations also. Sponsor data entry expectations. Okay. And contract agreement should match what sponsor create in the site monitor plan. So contract agreement should match with the site monitor plan. So the site monitor plan will be created by the sponsor. Sponsor will include there to what extent the monitoring should be done, at what level of monitoring should be done, at what frequency monitoring should be done, who will conduct the monitoring. These are all they will include in the plan. That plan will be given to the monitor. I'll show you how the plan look. I'm going to show you example plan. Okay. At the beginning of the study, it should be determined where the monitor or monitors will work while they are on site. So ideally, monitors should have their own workspace separate from the research team because they work remotely also. To check the data and all, they need not visit the site all the way. If the data is in electronic forms, EDC systems, they'll log into EDC, they'll check from their own place. Okay. Okay. So they review and assess the following. During the monitoring visits, they review and assess all these. So they review the enrollment status, rate of the study subjects. So the rate of enrollment status, rate of enrollment, any dropouts of the study subjects. Resources, laboratory, study supplies, product, compliance, CRF, SDV, informed consent reporting, files, safety reporting, AE and SAE reporting. What is AE? Adverse event. Unwanted, unintended, untoward medical occurrences. When the same adverse event results in the fatal, life-threatening, hospitalization, permanent disability, birth defects, or medically important event, it is called serious. So safety reporting also, they need to check, assess, and follow up on previously identified issues. Any issues identified previously, will even do the follow-up on that. Let's say monetary visiting, second periodic visit. Whatever the issues identified in the first periodic visit, they will even conduct the follow-up on that one. Okay. So how all these check? Review and assess the following, right? A to L we have points. We are going to check all these. Let's see. So apart from this, they will verify whether investigator has adequate qualification, whether he has adequate resources to conduct the trial. Okay. And facilities, they also check for the facilities, including lab, equipment, staff, whether they are adequately to safely and properly conduct the clinical trial, whether they are enough to conduct the clinical trial safely and properly, whether they remain adequate throughout the trial period. So they check for the investigator qualification and other resources. They check about lab. So resources they check about laboratory, a relevant SOP in case if we have any, quality control, quality assurance process. Okay. So equipments, results, facilities, reagents if any, specimen storage, when the lab sample collected, storage of the lab samples, functionality of equipment, lab equipments. Okay, tracking the subject specimen result, CRA. Okay. So study supplies also they will check, ensuring that the investigator receives all the study related documents. CRA will verify all the study related documents, whether the investigator receives all the study related documents, all trial related supplies which are required to conduct the clinical trial, and also comply with the regulatory guidelines. So shipment process, temperature maintenance, storage of the product, and disposal mechanism. These are all they verify. First of all, they ensure whether investigator receive all these IP, IB, other documents which are required to conduct the clinical trial. And also they check for the shipment of the product, temperature maintenance, storage of the product. So they check about the product. I think we already discussed this one. And they check, this is also given in the GCP guidelines. They check the storage times, conditions are acceptable, whether the supplies are sufficient throughout the trial, whether the supply of the product is enough throughout the trial. The product are supplied only to eligible subjects who are eligible to receive it. That too, at the protocol specified dose, the drug will be given to the subjects. Okay. And the subjects are provided with the necessary instruction on how to use, how to handle, how to store, how to return the product. Whether the subjects are informed about the product, how to handle the product. And the complete drug accountability should be documented. How much amount of drug received, used, written to the site, to the sponsor. Disposition of the unused product. Disposition of unused product. That means unused product will be disposed of. That disposition also will be done as per the guidelines, as per safety environment guidelines, regulatory guidelines. So whether this happen as per the guidelines, it will be checked by the CRA. So CRA will completely check the product maintenance, IP maintenance, IP maintenance, IP disposition, accountability of IP. So they also verify that the investigator trial staff are performing the trial functions according with the protocol, according with the agreement between the sponsor and investigator. Have not delegated these functions to unauthorized people. Investigator during the clinical trial, they'll delegate some functions, some activities to other persons like CRA, study coordinators. But those people must be authorized people. So make sure investigator not delegated these actions, these activities to unauthorized people. Also, investigator is enrolling only eligible subjects according to the eligibility criteria. Where do we get this eligibility criteria? So from where do we define the eligibility criteria? Eligibility criteria will be defined in the protocol. According to protocol only, we'll determine the eligibility criteria. Eligibility criteria includes two categories: inclusion, exclusion. While recruiting the subjects, we definitely follow that criteria. The CRA will verify whether investigator is following the criteria while recruiting the subjects. Whether written consent form obtained. Okay. And the source documents. They check the source documents. They also check the trial records are accurate, complete, kept up to date, whether they're properly maintained. They will verify all these in compliance and progress. They also check for the CRF. In the CRF point of view, they correct and accurately completed. That means whether the CRFs are correct, whether they are accurately completed, whether they are consistent with their source documents. Okay. So make sure only authorized people completing the CRF. And the corrections which are signed, dated, backed by the accurate SD. Okay. So whenever we are correcting the data on the CRF, how the correction will be done? So correction will be done if it is electronic, when you're collecting the data in electronic CRF. If I want to modify the data, I can modify, but your system will prompt you. Your system will prompt you. So your system will prompt you to asking you enter the reason for the modification. Enter reason for the modification. Okay. The reason will be captured in the audit trail. Audit trail is the document which consists of the information about the change. Whatever the change that you have done, we need to enter the reason for change, what kind of change, who is performing this change, on which date and time the change was done. This is in electronic form. Okay. So when you're correcting the data, okay, we'll correct the data. Okay, so then audit trail will be prompted asking you to modify the, asking you to enter the reason for the modification. So that is default. That is default. In case if it is paper, what happens? If it is paper, what we do, we'll just strike that value. Whatever the value that you're modifying, you'll just draw the single line across the value. Single line across the value. Near, very near space, will enter the new value. Existing value will strike through and enter the new value there, just beside the existing one. And there will even write the signature along with the date. So the new value, signature and date. Existing value will be strike through. Strike through single line. Okay, so this is what they do. Corrections which are made, signed, dated, backed by accurate SD. Data related queries accurately documented. So CRA will even check the queries which are in the data, which are generated. We'll have two types of queries: manual queries, system queries. CRA also can write the manual queries. CRA even they will check the open queries, system queries. So data related queries accurately documented, and they Like storage and shipment is secured, storage of the CRFs. The CRF should be stored in secure places. They perform the SDV, source data verification. So the concept is explained here. What is SDV, what is source data, what is source documents. Source data you already know. All information in original records. Certified copies of original records of clinical findings, observations, or any other activities in the clinical trial, which is important for the reconstruction evaluation of the trial. So source documents where you have your source data, original documents, hospital records, lab notes, physician notes, clinical charts, subject diaries, electronic diaries or paper diaries, pharmacy dispensing records, X-ray, scan, lab reports, pathology reports, okay, subject files, subject past medical history. These are all source documents only. Okay. So SDP, evaluation of the conformity of the data presented in the CRF with the source documents. Will confirm the data on the CRF, it is consistent with the source data. So it is to confirm that the data that is collected is complete, accurate, reliable, verifiable. So as it is to give confidence to sponsor, also regulatory authorities. It will support the marketing application also. So without SDV, no scientist can have confidence in the data presented and conclusions which are drawn. Conclusions which are drawn and data presented. So what are all the key data? Efficacy data, mainly inclusion-exclusion criteria. We'll cross-check the medical history, physical exam, vital signs, visit dates, and adverse events, concomitant medications, record that the patient entered clinical study and date of consent, consent form, enrollment dates, and consent forms. So what is a common approach? So critical data, non-critical data. So critical data focal to aims and objectives of the study, clinical study. Mainly focus on the aims and objectives of the clinical study. And this data must be correct. Informed consent, clinical notes, conformance to inclusion-exclusion. The subject satisfied the inclusion-exclusion criteria. Primary endpoints, secondary endpoints. We'll just explain what are primary endpoints, what are secondary endpoints. So I'll explain the objective also. So generally the objectives of the clinical trial, safety, efficacy, right? The main objectives. Let's say I have primary objective. Also I have secondary objective. I have primary objective, I have secondary objective. So let's say primary objective is safety. Secondary objective is efficacy. If your primary objective of the study is safety, then how can you reach this objective? Tell me what kind of parameters do we need to consider? Do we need to consider for analysis of safety? So ultimately we need to establish safety. To know whether the drug is safe. What kind of parameters that you require, that you collect. So you are taking some drug, let's say drug X. You are taking drug X. To know whether the drug X is safe or not, what do you collect? What kind of parameters that you consider? When can you say, how can you say that the drug is safe?
Are you saying that how can we say if the medication or let's say the drugs is safe?
Correct. Based on which data, based on which parameter, we can say that the drug is safe.
Parameter. Are we talking of the vital signs?
Okay.
Are we talking of looking at the vital signs of the patient, like checking the heart rate or the pulse rate, the
That's
temperature or blood pressure?
that's
If,
true. We'll check the
if,
vitals. What else will check?
if the patient doesn't complain, to say if the to be sure if the drugs is safe or not, that's after you've administered the medication, right? The drugs.
Mm.
First of all, the person will complain, or I don't know what they call the person now. The patient may complain, with dizziness, and
Mm.
if there is
Can
no,
we call them as? Yeah,
are we looking
correct.
at the side? Okay, let's say side effect of the drugs now. The
Correct.
patient complain of
Perfect. Side effect.
side effect. Maybe well, also depends on what the person is taking. Dizziness, um, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, um, and all that. And then to confirm, maybe we check basically the vital signs. And then maybe, I don't know if CRA draw blood. I don't know much about that. So, but at least
Mhm.
what we can see, what the patient can complain of that
Correct.
moment, either the patient complain of, oh, I'm feeling
That's
deep, I feel like falling down, or I feel like vomiting. So
that's true. That's true. Right. So this is what the adverse events. We can call them as adverse events, whether they are
S
serious or
essays.
non-serious.
Yeah, essays. Sorry, my microphone was down, so I had to log out and log in.
No problem. No problem. Yeah. Adverse events, which are serious, non-serious. So whether the adverse event is serious. We'll collect the adverse events before the drug, after the drug. Okay. Vitals also, any change after the treatment, after treatment with the new drug, if there is any change in the vitals, physical examinations. Okay. So we'll check. So these are the parameters. So these are called endpoints. So primary objective and primary endpoints. These will be given in the protocol. So objectives will be given in the protocol. Endpoints also will be given in protocol. Okay. Let's see if the secondary objective is efficacy. What will be the secondary endpoints? That means what kind of parameters that we need to assess for the efficacy, that we need to consider to assess the efficacy. What kind of parameters will help you to assess the efficacy? That means ultimately we need to know whether the drug is effective on the disease. So we cannot generalize. Like safety, we cannot generalize these efficacy, we need to know the study. Let's see, our study is back pain. Our study is back pain. If the study is back pain, if your secondary objective is efficacy, what will be the endpoint? That means based on which parameter we can say whether drug is working effective on the back pain.
We will check the pain scale, the back pain prior to the administered medication or the drugs. We're
Right.
going to document the pain. I'll put the pain on the scale level 1 to 10, and after the drugs, we check the scale, the pain, the scale level. If it is 1 to 10 prior to the medication, then after the medication, what's the scale level? We expect that if the drugs if the drug is function or is working, then the scale level should have dropped. If the patient say, oh, my pain level is 6 or 10 or 8, after
Correct.
administering the drugs, we expect, if the efficacy is good, we expect the patient to say, okay, my pain level is maybe 3 or 2. So we look at the pain scale, maybe verbally, or draw the how the patient express it. So I
Correct.
think pain scale is
Correct. Pain scale. We'll have different questionnaires for this pain scale. Okay. So we'll have set of questions we'll collect. Based on this pain scale, we'll see whether the drug is effective on the disease. Right. So pain scale that we collect before the drug, before giving them the drug, after giving them the drug, so that we can easily compare the pain scores, how they are before the drug, after. So this is the endpoint. So like this, we have objectives and we have endpoints in the protocol.
Do we also look at comparisons between placebos and
Yes, we do. It depends upon the design. We do that, but it depends upon the design of the study. If the
yes,
study
that's correct.
saying the study is placebo controlled,
Okay, thank you.
we'll compare our new drug with the placebo. Okay, if the design says it is active controlled, we'll compare our new drug with the active drug. Right. So the critical points that they check: primary endpoints, secondary endpoints. In recording, reporting of essays also they check. They'll also check whether the study drug was prescribed at the protocol specified dose, and whether the visits as per the protocol. Protocol will define the visits. Okay, so let's see. The protocol is saying the first month visit, second month visit, third month visit. Before that, day 1, week 5, week 8. Protocol will give you the visit window where the visit dates as per the protocol. So CRA has to thoroughly understand the protocol. CRA has to even understand the informed consent form. So these are all from the protocol only, you see. Inclusion, exclusion from the protocol, endpoints from the protocol. And this is visit dates and visit schedule also as per the protocol. So study drugs prescribed and specified also as per the protocol. Okay. So non-critical data. This is critical data, what we discussed, non-critical data. So very neat, high numbers of overwriting, rapid recruitment, lack of essays when they would be expected. So this is continuation of the source data verification only. The common problems. The data entered directly into CRF and brief medical history and short of clinical notes. Okay. That means medical history is not enough and the clinical notes also not enough. And data entered directly into CRF without any source documents. Sometimes this happens. Without source, directly the data entered into CRF without source documents. That point should be clearly specified in the protocol. For which points source documents, source data will not be there directly, they can be entered into CRF. And several volumes of the SD, we have a lot of source documents. If there is any source documents and CRF mismatch, illegible handwriting, acceptable error rate, maximum acceptable error rates. So the document the SDV process. So the SDV is done, SDV is examined, CRFs are checked, why they were selected, and critical, non-critical data items checked, and nature, frequency of error, whatever that we get. Any corrective actions taken. Did you correct that mismatches? How did you correct? The entire process will be documented. They check informed consent. They check informed consent. Each participant has personally signed the consent form. Personally signed and dated the consent form before the participation. Appropriate use of independent witness. So we'll have subject legally acceptable representative, LAR. Subject legally acceptable representative. So generally, when do we have LAR? When do we have the witness?
When the subject does not speak English or needs translation, or when the subject is a minor.
Right. Subject is minor. It required the witness like parent or guardian. If the subject is not educated, illiterate person, and if the subject is blind, subject not able to sign the, not able to read the protocol, not able to read the informed consent, not able to sign. Okay. So appropriate use of independent witness. Current version of the informed consent used. What does it mean? Informed consent also will be updated, modified. So currently, what is the consent used? What is the version used? Consent version. And names of the subjects giving the consent, date, time. Okay. So name of them, date, signature. Even investigator also should sign the informed consent. In that case, investigator name, investigator, signature, date. So all the pages of informed consent form present. In reporting point of view, they check subject recruitment rate, how many are coming for the visits, how many are recruited. Reporting of recruitment, trial progress, what are all the problems at the site, what are all the needs at the site, so lack of something at the site, solicit solutions. Filing, they review all the relevant section of the files. They review all the relevant sections of the files. They ensure it is up to date. That means they check what are all the documents which are essential during the study, before the study, after the study. For this point, they follow E6 guidelines. Let me show you E6. In the E6, we have the last point. Essential documents. Okay. So all these documents will be maintained in the TMF, Trial Master File. TMF, Trial Master File. So these are all essential documents you see. We'll discuss in detail later. These are all the documents you see. Investigate some documents before the trial, continuation of this document even during the trial also. Somewhat during the trial. See. In addition to having the file above documents and continuation of the above documents, updates, modifications. And after the trial also we'll maintain these documents. Okay, like this we have. Review all the relevant sections of the files. Ensure it is up to date. Ensure the document are placed in the relevant section. So we have investigator section, sponsor section, whether they are maintained and placed at the relevant place. About SAEs and AEs. AE is the adverse event, SAE is the serious adverse event. Ensure AEs are captured in CRF. Ensure no AEs are unreported. Ensure all the adverse events are captured on the CRF. No AEs are unreported. Ensure the proper reporting and documents are placed in case of AEs. Okay. Proper reporting and documents are placed. So whether that timely reported. So whether that properly reported. Okay. So these are all monitoring visits, routine visits, interim visits. During the conduct of trial, at the defined intervals, monitor will visit the site, check all these points. That will have closeout visits. So when the research study has been completed at the site, closeout visit will occur. So this type of visit can take the form of on-site visit, in some cases conducted via telephone. Some visits are also combined with the final periodic monitoring visit, last monitoring visit. These are all the action items. So these are all action items during the closeout visit may include discuss the timelines and strategies for the completion of outstanding case report forms. What are all the timelines and completion of any outstanding CRF or any outstanding pending queries? Pending queries. We'll discuss the timelines for that. When we are going to complete them. Written destruction of the study drug. Written and destruction of the study drug. That means unused product will be written and disposed of. So collect the outstanding patient data forms. collect outstanding patient data forms like screening, monitoring logs, final review of all the study documents, and discuss what are all the plans for the record retentions. Discuss ongoing investigator responsibilities. So before closeout, this is closeout. At the closing of the study, monitor will visit the site. It can be telephonic visit, it can be on-site visit, or some closeout visits will be combined with the final periodic visit. Okay, when the research study has been completed, the closeout visit will occur. So it's a final check.
Thank you very much. I've noticed that slide 30 of 36 is omitted from my mail.
Okay, I'll look at that one. I'll look at
Okay,
that one and I'll
okay,
resend it.
thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So I'm going to close the session for today.